You're live.
Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Poikinen. I'm here in half burnout, ready to be flooded and mountain slid, torn apart, shut down, and locked down Boulder Creek, California. It's getting hectic over here, man. It really is. I live in a third world country and the world's fifth largest economy. It is cartoon. It is. I am joined by my better than your co-host, Glory Jones. What's happening, Glory? How are you? It's good to see you.
I'm doing as good as I can be.
I missed you on Thursday. I did. I
miss
feel
you guys too.
I'm adrift without my co-host.
Oh, shut up.
Rudderless.
Shut up. Dude. You'll be fine without me. Come on now.
We're delighted here on Slow News Day today because returning to the program, one of hands down my favorite guests, one of my favorite people to converse with, lawyer, author, muckraker,
Nazi collaborator,
one of the most dangerous attorneys on the planet because of the thoughts in his head, Jared Beck.
Wow.
Jared, it is fantastic to see you.
What an introduction. That's going to be hard to live up to.
You know what, man? I was talking with Glory before you got into the call here, and it fucking amazes me how you personally have become like just transformed into some sort of demon over the last like 4 years, and nothing about like the way that you operate has changed. Nothing about like the thoughts that you've had or have been expressing for the entire time. Like none of this shit is new, but because it doesn't fit the narrative of the authoritarian left, they've decided to make you one of their punching bags, and by extension now me and a couple other people, not
Right.
because of you, but just for having like
They exiled me to the gugab back in 2019 when I took issue with Kamala Harris, based on how she rose in politics, and
rather how parts of her rose in politics.
Mostly because I'm a parent of two girls, and I don't feel they should ever have to be in a position where they feel like it's a good thing to engage in a sexual relationship at work in order to get ahead, and that's exactly what she did with Willie Brown. I just don't want, regardless of the fact that these people are puppets, and I'm not really interested in politics like that anymore. I mean, they're held up as these moral figures. It's part of the propaganda that they get in school, and I mean, I object to that path as being a viable path for women, because I think the power imbalance there is just shocking and horrible in so many ways. And yet, of course, the establishment, the authoritarian left, whatever you want to call them, there's never going to talk about that. And I think it's a real shame. Even though Willie Brown himself writes opinion pieces or, articles in the USA Today bragging about it. I mean, that
well,
he made.
I appreciate that. So thanks.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Glory?
I said, as a daughter, I appreciate that. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I want to see my girls live in a world where, their gender truly doesn't matter. And here we are elevating people where it's like, oh yeah, I mean, as long as you're in the right party, this like just, I think, primitive way of structuring the workplace is allowed to prosper. I mean, it's like you always say, Steve. I mean, it's like we're living in a cartoon.
I really, and look, the concept that somehow like the people of Syria will be happier because a brown person ordered the drone strikes, or because a woman ordered the drone strikes, is just, I mean, it's mind numbing. And look, Biden, we all know that Biden has instant grits in his head, where his brains used to be like not the good kind of grits that take 25 minutes to prepare, but the instant shit, you know, like the really bad kind.
Oh, you're making me hungry now. I want like a bowl of grits with, like, you know, melted cheese.
Oh, damn.
Salt and pepper and
a little bit of butter.
Anyway.
Yeah. So welcome to Slow News Day's Country Kitchen with Jared Beck. We're really excited to prepare some breakfast meals for you today.
We got Biden grits, Biden brain grits.
Biden brain grits. Yeah.
Biden,
this is essentially Kamala Harris's administration. And it will be, you know, I have a feeling they're going to try and keep Joe alive for at least 2 years to give Harris the opportunity to be president for 10. But in the absence of that, just all around, this is Biden's Harris's administration, and people are tripping over their dicks already to excuse away every single atrocity that's going to be committed for the next 4 years because we beat fascism.
Right.
Because the orange man is now gone and half the country are domestic terrorists.
Well, you know, Steve, Trump was always more of a personal fascist than Biden, you know. I'm okay with fascism. I just don't like it when it shows in your behavior, you know. That's bad. And it's disgusting. It's like the empire is only going to be further enabled. The security state is only going to increase, and that's going to happen. And that was going to happen regardless of Trump or Biden entering office. So it's like pretending that somehow fascism and racism went away is so dumb.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Back in December, which now seems like a fucking year ago.
It was a while of it. It went by fast.
We had you on, or no, yeah, we did. I think we had you on you were on a couple of times there real quick, and it was right after the JFK murder palooza, which is still one of my favorites. That was so much fun. But we had talked about having you back on to go through your, like, the Jared Beck's grand conspiracies of the modern era. Right?
My conspiracies.
Well,
what you have
pinpointed out.
Right-wing grifter himself.
I only wish I could orchestrate like a conspiracy to freaking get out of bed in the morning. I mean, you know.
It was okay. So what you have identified as, I forget. I'm talking to a fucking lawyer. What you have identified as, not what are yours personally, but what you have identified as the 4 grand conspiracies of the modern era. One of them is like the Beatles psyop and the larger Tavistock conspiracy. And I thought that it might be kind of fun to totally morally break my audience who has loved the music of the 60s.
Who's not already broken, like completely mentally crippled right now? I mean, this has been like the year, or, you know, past 2 years of just like extraordinary mental destruction and decimation. So if there's ever a time to just take on more of it, now's the time, right? Before fragile minds start to repair themselves, you know, just make sure that they're ground into dust so we can rebuild appropriately.
You sound like a travel coach. I love it.
I mean, yeah. So on that note, Oh man, no! I look. This is definitely the place to have this conversation because, like we've said before, we do have the best and best looking audience in YouTube.
Yeah.
And
this is the last show I do. I mean, nobody wants to interview me anymore. I'm like completely other than Lee Stranahan on Sputnik Radio.
mm-hmm.
Other than him, like everybody is like, this is the only place that'll have me. I mean, Jason Goodman doesn't have anything to do with me after this fiasco. When I told his audience that Trump's legal challenge didn't stand a chance in hell, and the most he was going to get was like 2 dissenting justices in a short written opinion. And you can look on the video. I made that prediction like 7 days before it happened. But his audience threw so much hatred and abuse my way. I mean, it was insane. I mean, you think I get hate from the left. Okay, so they send me off to the goo gab, and I hang out with the gabbers for basically like the past 2 years. I mean, with nobody else to talk to, and I go on shows like Jason Goodman's Crowdsource the Truth, and because the right wingers like the fact that I sued the DNC and exposed their bullshit in 2016, and they're just, waking up to this now that the DNC rigs elections, even though we were screaming that at the top of our lungs for 4 years. Anyway, no one listens to me, whatever. But the point is like, I'm talking, so I had a bunch of, people that were sort of, would listen to me on these shows, but they totally turned on me. This was like a week before, I guess the electoral votes were counted, but they still, like, in their minds believed that Trump was going to prevail and was going to be installed, and that this Biden thing was just a distraction, and that Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood were going to win these great legal victories. And I was just telling them, no, it's not going to happen. You have to get with reality here. And they just exploded on me. And now I'm not invited back. I had words with Jason, who I considered a friend, but I was like, dude, your audience treated me so. I mean, I don't have to do this. I'm not getting paid to do any of this. All right. I mean, the least we can be is sort of polite and civil to people that are trying to work out what's going on in the universe. And you don't have to watch. I don't ask for money. I don't accept money. I mean, if you want to send me money, I'm going to send it right back, because that's not how I make a living. I don't grift the public. But some people, they're just so tied to their illusions, and this shoot the messenger mentality, I think, is just so toxic and horrible. And it really makes people like me want, not really want to give a fuck. But anyway, back to, I'm sorry, Steve. That was a long rant, and I apologize for
Jared. I have become the internet therapist.
Right. I noticed your handle's like the involuntary therapist, right? I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, people in lawsuits, they use their lawyers as therapists all the time, and oftentimes they use lawsuits as therapy. But anyway, that's another discussion. But yeah, no, so thank you for allowing me to lean on you there for a little therapy. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're quite welcome. It'll be $75 an hour. We're doing discounted rates.
That's as far as therapist rates are. That's pretty good deal right there.
Yeah, no, bargain basement rates, because I don't have a degree. Yeah. Jared, what the fuck is Tavistock?
Yeah, so what is Tavistock literally, or what is the conspiracy?
We might as well introduce what Tavistock is literally, and then sort of use that to walk our way into the conspiracy.
Right. So Tavistock literally was an institute in the United Kingdom, which was established ostensibly for the purpose of conducting social research and being a research institution, a gathering point, a community of social scientists in London who were interested in sort of the emerging theories surrounding psychological control, psychological development, sort of the broad array of topics that go into really the emergence of modern psychology in the 20th century. And this institute was very much connected to the British Secret Service, which had refined and become very interested in psychological techniques through World War I and World War II. And what you have to understand, I think, is that, you know, World War I was really the first war where psychology was truly weaponized, both against domestic populations and abroad, alongside conventional military means. And that, from that seed in World War I, what developed was sort of this concept that psychology might not be useful just in wartime, but could also be useful in peacetime to affect society at large in various ways. I mean, that's sort of a rough overview of what Tavistock is. In terms of why it's significant, I think it can be summed up like this. Through Tavistock and its affiliated organizations in the United States, which included the Stanford Research Institute, other academic institutions in the US, scientists were able to network with deep state or intelligence elements in order to run some pretty wild psychological operations on the population. And one of those operations, I think the evidence is becoming clearer and clearer, was the phenomenon that we know as the Beatles.
So apologies in advance to the Beatles fans who are going to watch this, but fuck your feelings.
We're sorry, Kendra. We still love you.
I love you, but fuck your feelings. No, look, I want to make it perfect. John and I were talking about this. The whole the whole counterculture revolution, the whole Beatles, Grateful Dead, Frank Zappa, Laurel Canyon, all of that stuff, dude. This in no way, shape, or form means that you can't hear a song and appreciate it.
Right.
In no way, shape, or form means you have to stop listening to or liking that band. It just means you have a little bit more understanding of how the world around you works.
I'll take it further. I didn't particularly like the Beatles until I became fully conscious of this, of Tavistock and how they were created. I think it adds a whole element and layer to their music that, you know, if you just sort of, if you're not conscious of it, you know, maybe you're not even, there's a possibility you're not even appreciating it at the highest level. I'll just throw that out there. So, you know, open your mind to these ideas. The best, by the way, I'm not the best source on this stuff. The direct source, if you really want like the full Tavistock Beatles presentation, you have to go to a YouTuber named Mike Williams, otherwise known as the Sage of K, who's done just phenomenal research in this area, and he just seems like a really cool dude. I've never met him, but he's just really based, as the kids say, He's and he covers other topics as well, like the vaccines and a little bit of politics. But his thing has been the Beatles for years, and his research is so incredible that he's actually caught the second Paul McCartney's eye, and they sort of communicate. And for those of you unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, the guy who claims to be Paul McCartney is not really Paul McCartney. The real Paul McCartney died in 1968, I believe, possibly in a car crash. But this guy, his real name is the Paul McCartney that people are probably familiar with, because the real Paul McCartney's been long dead. Is not the guy. His real name is Billy Shears, and he was replaced. He replaced the real Paul McCartney, and that's part of what we're talking about with Tavistock, is that the Beatles are not so much a band, but a psychological experiment that was used in conjunction with other bands and other musical movements and so forth to psychologically push the population in certain directions. And I think this experiment had extraordinary ramifications. I don't know if they were all intended, but we're living that today. And when we think about how fucked up our media world is and how fucked up our politics is, we have to go back to things like Tavistock to see why people think in such odd ways. Anyway, that's my thesis, but
Well, I'm here for all of this, but my friend, I don't look at the Tavistock conspiracy as like the great explainer, but there are so many different facets of as you just said, how we think right now, how information is filtered to us, how we process it, how we relay it to other people. Like that kind of shit fascinates me. Anyone right now or after the show, because you're watching, so don't do it right now, but you can go and see the sort of like moment in mid 50s, early 60s, when behavioral psychologists started becoming part of advertising and started becoming part of the boards of like network broadcasting companies and things like that. And so what I want to impart to the people who are watching right now, who are like, they just broke my dreams by shitting on the Beatles or Zappa or the Grateful Dead or whatever. Like, again, this is more to like better understand the world in which we live, and all of this shit, in my opinion, should be treated like a buffet. Like absolutely take what you want to help you better understand. And if there's something that just falls on its face, under the weight of evidence, you don't have to put that on your plate. You don't. Flat the fuck out.
Right.
Social distance buffet. Yeah.
But this shit is so amazing to me, because I spent like 7 hours in the Tavistock rabbit hole yesterday.
Yeah.
A lot of which was spent with Dr. John Coleman.
Okay. He wrote the book, sort of the book on it was called the Committee of 200 or something, Committee of 500, something. There's some committee, a committee of numerous people. But that's sort of the seminal work, and he was affiliated with the British Secret Service for a while, and so it's probably a limited hangout in many ways, but limited hangouts are there, and you need to avail yourself of them to get started on any of these rabbit holes, you know.
100%. And according to Coleman, the entire counterculture, and basically the new left that emerged from it is a carefully orchestrated and well-maintained psychological operation that is pushing all of us into complete mindless obedient fascism.
Yep.
And so that's his premise, and I think the if we start to like deconstruct what happened in the counterculture, you know, you find it difficult to argue, certainly, especially with the sort of like 60-year lens that we have.
Exactly. Exactly. We have the tools that weren't available back then to deconstruct any of this in real time, which we're always doing now, by the way, in our media crazed world. I mean, for example, the Capitol riot that I think you were in DC during that event, right?
I was on the ground for that. Yeah.
And look how that event has been deconstructed by all sides in real time. I mean, I was, you know, watching streams and trying to flip to the best stream, you know, and I, you know, that only, but no matter where you're situated, whether you're there in DC, whether you're watching streams, you're already trying to make sense of an event that hasn't even unfolded yet. I mean, it's crazy. It's like, you know, but people weren't living in that world back then. They had no means to understand events in that manner, in that real-time manner. Although people weren't dumb. And in the case of the Paul is dead thing, I mean, people figured it out shortly after Paul, the first Paul died. It was actually 1966 in a car crash. This rumor, they called it, started to spread across college campuses that Paul McCartney had died, and it was published in student newspapers, and people were detecting the back masked messages on the Sgt. Pepper, and they were reading the album for clues, and they were putting the pieces together because the Beatles actually, Tavistock wanted people to be able to put the pieces together in some manner. I mean, that's part of the psychology that's going on, but it was a slower process, and it was very easily squashed by the mainstream media as just a bunch of, crazy college kids and their LSD and marijuana, which was also part of the whole operation. So
yeah, this is where, and I know we've got a couple of, there's people in the chat right now who are here to hear about the Beatles, who are here to hear about the Grateful Dead, who are here to hear about, Zappa or Zeppelin or whatever. And the LSD thing in particular, it affects me personally. I spent allegedly a number of years in hotel rooms and parking lots and other very disaffiliated places of gathering are centered around Grateful Dead tour. And there were allegedly, ridiculous amounts of LSD that were being moved through those parking lots and hotel rooms and other areas. And the Tavistock thing says that LSD was weaponized through the CIA to intentionally redirect the revolutionary sentiment and energy that was building up in the country.
Yep.
And that is pretty easy to take in,
Yeah.
Where it gets a little bit weird is that there are people who claim that like Jerry Garcia himself was on the payroll of the CIA.
Right.
Or being paid by the FBI, and a bunch of people have, looked through and given FOIA requests for and tried to find those specific documents. And so and again, I haven't been able to find them. So the counter argument goes like this: if the dead was being weaponized by the CIA to help distribute LSD throughout the country, why then were they targeted as a drug smuggling operation by the FBI, and why was the push to criminalize LSD so prevalent in the media? So I would put that question to you. I have my own answer. I'm curious as to see what yours is.
Yeah. So first thing is I know the one piece of direct evidence that I've seen connecting the dead to Tavistock is that I believe there's a son of a Tavistock professor or affiliated professor who actually worked for the dead as an agent or promotion manager or something. And I can try to dig that up. But when I saw that, I was like, okay, well, there's a pretty strong indication of at least infiltration. And let's remember, the dead aren't just, the guys in the band. I mean, it's a whole organization that's putting on that show. Very easy to infiltrate organizations like that, right? So you don't need, Jerry Garcia's conscious participation, okay? And nobody's saying that these guys necessarily didn't write their own music. I mean, I would say that about the Beatles. I wouldn't necessarily say that about the Dead. I mean, the operations were different from band to band. Some were directly controlled, and I think they used body doubles and they swapped people in and out. That would be like the Beatles. Why is anybody surprised though? Isn't that what they do with isn't that the whole music industry now, is they swap bodies in and out of fabricated groups to sing music that is written by other people? I mean, so this was just sort of an advanced model for that. But, part of the Beatles psyop was to promote this kind of authenticity, which they really didn't have. But just getting back to the Dead for a moment, because I want to answer your question. So my response would be, well, number one, it doesn't take much to infiltrate a large kind of organization like that and use them for this purpose, especially when there's a symbiosis between their music and the LSD. I mean, it enhances the experience, right? So why is this seen as incredible by people when actually the symbiosis is there? And yeah, I mean, yes, of course, the FBI often prosecutes its own assets from time to time to have leverage over them. I mean, that's how they get them to do what they want. I mean, if you're not going to use the carrot, use the stick, right? So that doesn't surprise me at all. And I think that when you look at not just the Dead, but there's a great book by David McGowan about the Laurel Canyon scene and the number of people in the Laurel Canyon music scene that were connected to the military, starting with Jimmy Morrison, whose father was like the most powerful man in the Navy. Now you're going to tell me it's a coincidence that his son, who by the way wasn't a musician, but went to film school and then hooked up with this band as a singer. How did he shoot to the top, right? I mean, come on. Are we gonna just assume everything's a coincidence? I mean, and what's more plausible, that the deep state, which was fully formed at this time, wasn't using the most powerful means of communication? That was our social media at the time, was music. It's no longer our social media, but that's how people communicated. They went to concerts, they went to festivals, they went to Woodstock, they were in a scene. I mean, that was your social media.
And before that, it was coffee houses and folk music and Benzedrine and wine. Like, there was always a component of.
And they were equally infiltrated. Bob Dylan. I mean, he's really the I would say, of all the people, that's sort of the American counterpose to the Beatles. It's Bob Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually freely admits it. Anybody who wins a Nobel Prize, come on.
You know what's funny is that Julian Assange said the mark of service to humanity is not a Nobel Prize nomination; it's charges under the Espionage Act.
Correct.
Yeah.
100% correct.
Or a CIA assassination attempt.
Right. But the Nobel Prize is the tell that, you know, this person has done a great. The other tell is the knighthood.
I was just gonna try and throw Sir Paul under the bus.
But it's true. I mean, they were knighted by the Queen. I mean, these were people that were supposedly
arbiters of the worst degradation and perversion ever to cross Christian shores, Jared Beck.
Right, but when they were marketed and lapped up by the public, they were presented as antithetical to the monarchy. That they were going to, you know, this was going to lead to the, you know, destruction of morals. The Beatles, you know, John Lennon says we're more important than Jesus, and you know, this is how it was presented. And oh, look, now, you know, Paul McCartney, well, you know, Billy Shears, I mean, or you can call him Fall. You know, that's the sort of the moniker he gets in the Paul is Dead community. But yeah, he's getting the knighthood from the Queen. Come on, I mean, let's be real here.
Yeah, I mean, shit, dude, this is fun. It is.
Funny you bring that up though, because like there's so many figures that you can think of like throughout time, not just in pulp culture, that have built this brand out of being like, you know, anti-establishment but still establishment friendly at the same time underneath the surface. Like obviously, you know, AOC for like that's literally her whole brand, and you know, obviously she has ties to CAA, so it's like right. There's this whole fusion of like entertainment and politics that really uplifts these people to be rebellious enough but not like truly wanting to make proactive change.
Correct. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, Glory, because this is actually why it's so important to study these you know, conspiracies, or you know, I would call them the archetypal conspiracies that were propagated on the Western society during the 20th century, because they provide the sort of the key to understanding why it is that people react to a modern day figure like AOC the way they do. And it's because this type of, you know, rebellious celebrity, you know, the celebrity who's part of the establishment but satisfies your need to rebel because you're living vicariously through them, which is, you know, what the Beatles were all about. I mean, you were living vicariously through these people, and the idea of the celebrity musician was really, you know, taken to a whole nother level through them. And it's exactly what you said, Glory, that this image, they've psychologically tricked you to fulfill your need to rebel against what you see as the confining institutions or rules of society. And it's a way of inducing extraordinary conformity. And that's what we see on the authoritarian left today, is extraordinary, well, and on the authoritarian right too. I mean, extraordinary conformity.
It's the ability to rock the boat without tipping it or changing the direction of the boat.
To feel like you're rocking the boat.
Yeah.
It's giving you that feeling, that thrill, you know. In the old days, it was more tied to music because we didn't have social media. Now it's like sitting on, you know, on your ass in front of a screen and clicking a like button on Twitter or Facebook, and you know, giving people that dopamine rush that is, you know, they you know, should be associating with political action or whatever you want to call it. I mean, something that's not sitting on your ass, like clicking a button.
And yet here we are on basically like, or at least here in California, you know, or at least here in Santa Cruz County, on a shelter-in-place order where free assembly is about to become more or less criminalized.
Right.
We've got armchair activists and 100% plants being held up as cult of personality types, people that we have to listen to, or pundits, and that whole class of individual as like the sole arbiters of truth. Seems like it seems like the stated goals of the Tavistock conspiracies outlined are running along pretty much on schedule.
It would seem so. Whether or not that was, I mean, I'm still, I'm still split as to whether it was all intended, or whether they had more short-term goals in mind, or whether they were just fucking around to see what they could do. I mean, a lot of these people are, when you take the problem with professors is that they're not often the most practical people, and if you give them, sort of access to policy making, they can really fuck things up bad, because their curiosity overrides their moral sense. Okay, I think we're seeing that with the COVID thing, by the way. I mean, we're seeing the result of having too many technocratic type people directly involved in the policy making process,
and that's intentional.
Yeah, things go off the rails pretty easily. Even though these guys think that they're the smartest people in the room, guys or women. I mean, it's they think they're the smartest people in the room, and it just goes off the rails because really they're actually just more interested in seeing what happens, as well as aggrandizing their power. So, it may be more of something that's spun out of control. I don't know, because at the end of the day, I think all of these effects, these aggregated effects that we're seeing, have made us less vigorous of a society in many ways, and generally speaking, that's a bad thing for everybody who lives in the West. That we're sort of just less vigorous people, because there are other people outside the West that are more vigorous, and it's a jungle out there, and I think we're seeing the effects of that, because I think there's a lot of geopolitical problems in the world, and I'm not sure Western societies are up to the task anymore, quite frankly.
Well, does that presume that we would have to engage in traditional warfare in order to maintain our vigor?
No, not at all. I think it's all about asymmetrical warfare these days and psychological warfare. The problem is that I think we're psychologically less vigorous. I mean, we're all breaking down here. There's look, people are in, they're having a hard time, and I get it. I'm sympathetic to it. I mean, nobody likes being locked in all day, but it's not like bombs are raining down on the country. It's not like we're in Syria. Okay, I mean, at the end of the day, it hasn't gotten as bad as it's going to get or could get, and we're already seeing the signs, I think, of at least I'm sensing. I'm not saying everybody's like this, but I do feel from talking to people and speaking with people, and I think psychologists would probably agree that there's a lot of signs of deep psychological stress out there. And you can definitely see it in the pitch of if you want to call it a media dialogue or media discourse. You can see it in the social media. People like Lynn Wood are calling to assassinate the vice president. And that's a lawyer right there. So if he's calling for that, what are other people doing? So people are losing their shit. And I'm not saying rigged elections are a good thing and you should just take it, and what I'm saying is psychological vigor. Okay, I mean, it hasn't gotten nearly as bad as it could get. So it's not time to break down and fall apart.
So
I think the Tavistock has done that to us. It's made us susceptible to breaking apart easily.
I do feel like this country and the West in general has been psychologically traumatized
Yes.
more or less since birth
Yes.
for about at least 50 years, if not longer.
More. You have to
Uh,
go back. There's a great book. There's a great book that I just read. It's called Tubes of Plenty. It's all about the TV industry from its inception. And TV started as a propaganda tool in its very beginning. What did they cover? They covered elections. That was like the first stuff they covered. So it's from the very beginning, okay, TV. I mean, because the people who were like fiddling with all the tubes and playing around with the radio signal, I mean, they were in the military, okay? All this stuff was originally military technology that the people involved with later trotted out to the masses, but they already had an understanding of how this was something that could be used to psychologically torture people, and so it's in the DNA. So it goes back to the very birth of television. Obviously in the early days of TV, not everybody had a TV. They were small. People weren't as dazzled by them. But yes, we've reached, a point of I would say total media saturation, and I would say that the degree of psychological torture goes up with the degree of media saturation.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of how like most technology originates from the military, like radios and television, when you think of that, you kind of get to the deeper point of what the purpose of that is. And now, is vaccines. So
Right. And that's a great point. And the other point I would make is that these technologies aren't necessarily bad in and of itself, but the problem is that by the time they're rolled out and the people gain access to them, they've already been analyzed and deployed with the intent of using them to control or manipulate or psychologically torture the population. So we never get a chance. I mean, with the internet, there was sort of a heyday before. I mean, they were still controlling it, but they let it, prosper a little more in a free market sense. So they'll let little bubbles of sort of, free experimentation bubble up now and then, more or less to observe what happens, I think. But, when it's time, they clamp down and they control. And that pattern is going to happen, I think, indefinitely. I don't see how we're ever going to get out of that.
I mean, I guess frog marching and then subsequent hanging and placing heads on spikes all around of the people primarily responsible for this could do it, but that's probably not going to happen. I think at this point, man, especially since we're knocking on the door of the Great Reset, that what we're going to see more and more of are individual communities basically seceding from society.
Yes. Seceding's the big word. I think secession is on the table in a lot of different ways. The New York Review of Books just ran an article saying we need to take secessionist talk seriously. This was like a couple days ago. So if the mainstream media is putting out messaging like that, it means it's in the cards, and deliberately so. The game plan here, and I think it's part and parcel of what's called the Great Reset, is to fragment the United States, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of forces out there that don't profit from the hegemonic U.S. dollar. They don't want to live anymore under a regime where the U.S. gets extraordinary benefits from the fact that the dollar is the hegemonic currency under the petrodollar system. And the best way to take that out is to fragment the fiat that's behind the currency. So you break the country into parts, and the dollar is no longer what it was because it doesn't have the same country behind it. And I think that's where we're headed. And I mean, I'm sort of morally neutral on it. I think it bothers a lot of people. I think a lot of people sense it, but I think it's something we're all going to have to deal with.
I feel like, well, okay, so we've got since 2018 really, but more so in 2019 and most of 2020, we had Western world leaders incorporating World Economic Forum themes into their campaign slogans. Build Back Better being one of them. It was dumb as fuck, and nobody knew what anybody was talking about when they said it. But Justin Trudeau, Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Angela Merkel, Greece's president, like all these people have incorporated that into their messaging, as well as like flat out saying, yeah, we're trying to work towards UN's Agenda 2030, like just come, casually.
Right.
In conversation. And even if people aren't watching that, or they're not like watching this show, when you talk to people, or at least when I do, most of them have this inherent sense that something is really wrong, but everybody is sort of caught up in their own, red team, blue team information bubble.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they don't have a complete picture of what it is that's wrong. And if you're walking around half right, if you're walking around 50% correct, like you're also walking around 50% incorrect, and 50% isn't a passing grade anywhere in the world.
Well, I mean, even if you know what's going on, you don't really have too much. There's not too much you can do about it, though, either. I mean, that's the other problem here. It's not just consciousness. I feel it's sort of a double, a double-edged problem, or there's two-headed problem. I mean, there's the problem of consciousness, waking people up, which I mean, I think everybody can agree that's very, very difficult and frustrating. But then when you wake people up, I mean, what are people supposed to do? I mean, I think the Capitol thing is a great example of, sort of the consequences of sort of a bunch of people waking up to something. So I mean, I'd be interested to hear your take on that, because I think it's a very multifaceted event. I don't think it'll be properly understood for some time. It's certainly, I mean, just based on the facts, I mean, it's the very first time that the Capitol has been taken over by a mob. The Capitol was occupied by the British in the War of 1812, so it's not the first time that it was occupied, but occupied by a domestic mob. I think that's a pretty big deal. Other countries like France, they overthrow the Republic every so often, and it's like no big deal. The society goes on. I mean, France is France, people occupy shit. Governments get overthrown.
This was
in the U.S. This is a very big deal for us.
This was the shortest and most peaceful occupation of any capital in history. To the point to where, look, the thing that I keep trying to stress to people when I talk to them in my real life about being there for this shit is that when in a normal insurrection, the people on the other side of the building that you're insurrecting don't open it and wave you in.
Right.
And they don't take selfies with you. And the mob doesn't, carefully walk between the velvet rope through the building. And like, I mean,
so where were you? Where were you for all of this?
So I was on the back front side of the Capitol, not the front back side of the Capitol. So the front back side faces the Supreme Court. I was on the back front side that faces the Washington Monument.
Okay. So did you go in there? Or
I did not go in, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay. Good.
But like, there's literally this video where like the buffalo hat guy comes through and he's walking through like the Senate building, and the security guard following him is just like, do you think you guys could maybe leave the chamber anytime soon? It's like, please politely asking.
Right. This is our most sacredest space that I am not in any way, shape, or form going to defend.
Well, this is our sacredest space, dude.
Right. So my wish is that some people had maybe seized that moment to make some kind of declaration of principles or issue a statement. I mean, the problem is, and I don't want to demean anybody, because I have a lot of sympathy for those folks. I mean, I feel like in 2016, when I was in Philadelphia with my wife and we saw Bernie Sanders get robbed at the convention. We weren't at the convention itself, but we were in Philly, and people were walking, and people were very, very peaceful there, by the way. I mean, I don't know were you in Philly?
I didn't make it to Philly. I had a number of friends that were on the ground for that, and they said that everybody was peaceful until the cops got violent.
Yeah, I didn't see. I mean, I saw like Jill Stein like walking the streets, and there was it was like very much, and people were angry, but peaceful. The delegates left the convention. So I feel all the sympathy in the world for those folks. And I don't want to like Monday morning quarterback anyone, but I feel like the problem is that what happened there was more like a flash mob than a movement.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, flash mobs are what they are. They're just movements of people.
Well, they're marketing.
What's that?
They're marketing.
Yeah, right. Well, they're marketing, and that's another problem. I mean, they can be easily infiltrated. They can, symbols can be inserted. People can pull all kinds of hijinks, but they're not like organized by anybody to affect any kind of purpose. And so, either you have like total chaos, or in this case, I think, from what I understand, it seemed like a pretty orderly and highly respectful group of people, with at least some sympathetic cops there. So, but however it ends up, it doesn't push the ball forward, and in fact, it creates extraordinary repercussions, because look how the mainstream media has seized on everything it can from that very multifaceted event to paint Trump and his supporters into the tiniest of corners.
Well, and it's not just Trump or Trump supporters. It's everybody that was on the ground there, regardless of what they were for, is now a domestic terrorist.
Correct.
And this includes a lot of black and brown people that the media would like to label as a white supremacist or a white nationalist now. And some of these people are my friends, and I know for a fact that none of them are white supremacists or nationalists.
I mean, that shouldn't even have to be said. I mean, when you see like hundreds of thousands of people, like, you can't make like general statements about what that's about. You just can't. I mean, and if you see one Confederate flag, I had a discussion with a friend of mine who's like, oh, one Confederate flag is, one too many. I'm like, and how do you know what that flag, I mean, that could be an infiltrator. I mean, just as much as it could be a crazy person, just as much as it could be a racist Southerner, just as much as it could be a racist Northerner, just as much as it could be like some dude from Germany who's just there for the ride and things. I mean, you have no ideas, and this is literally the definition of a false flag, and yet,
yes.
The entire time, every time somebody asks me about this, I say, look, I can only speak to what I saw. I will tell you what area of the Capitol building I was at, and where I was earlier in the day, because I was right by the Washington Monument during Trump's speech, and we were talking to everyone because we were right at the entrance to where you had to move through the little cattle guard to get into the main area of the speech. And I say that, and then I say what I saw was, a real-time false flag taking place, where 300,000 people were used as set dressing to roll out domestic terrorist legislation.
Correct.
And most of the people that I talked to, Jared, were there because they felt like this was the only way they could draw attention to what they felt like it was a fraudulent election where they had been disenfranchised at the ballot box. And they really, it was like their first day. It was like their first protest. You know, I mean, most of these people are brand new to any kind of movement, and they were mindful everybody was and shit like that. And it's like, dude, you're there for common cause. This is what common cause is. Of course, most of the people you meet are going to be polite and respectful because you fucking share something, you know, like wrap your head around that and realize that it doesn't just have to be about Donald Trump, and maybe we can go somewhere with this.
Well, it's, I mean, you know, another constitutional right that's being trampled is the right to petition our government for redress. What does that mean? It means you go to the Congress, which is a public building, and you go in and you voice your complaints, okay? Which is, I think, what they were doing. I mean, and I think that's what they interpreted, regardless of what Donald and Trump intended in his speech. That's what they heard. You know, maybe some like really angry people heard, you know, rip shit up and drag Nancy Pelosi and AOC out of there. You know, and in zip ties, and maybe some of those were infiltrated. I don't know, but it seems to me that it was basically petitioning the government for redress, which is respected, supposedly respected in our Constitution.
And when I flew back the next day, I had a 6-hour flight. And the entire flight was Trump supporters. Like, the flight attendants were just scared shitless and basically hid for the entire thing. People are openly like hitting their vape pens and hitting their weed pens and shit on the plane. Yeah, there was just, the flight attendants were just, nobody's wearing a mask. Like, fucking, they were like, oh my God, I can't, you know, I can't. And so they flat out just hid, but you could, like, you know, turn around and have a conversation with your fucking neighbor. And the majority of the people that I talked to were...
Did they like hide in the bathroom? I mean,
they hit the, you know, the little areas.
The galley.
Yes, straight up. Buckled in the little jump seat by the bathrooms, head turned, not making eye contact with anyone at all. And I'm in the middle of the plane. So I'm like, yell at me.
Right.
Come yell at me. You know, fucking, let's do this. And no, dude, nothing. And the people on the plane that had gone to the event were pissed because they felt like they'd been used.
Right.
They knew that it was, you know, a consciously expressed thought. And I don't know how long that thought stayed. You know, I don't know if they got home and then got swept back up in the news cycle and all of the you know, all that shit.
It stayed. I think it stayed. I think people know when they've been sold out. I mean,
but it was fuck Trump, fuck Mitch McConnell, fuck the Republican Party, fuck the Democrat, fuck all this shit.
They should say fuck Trump. He abandoned his supporters.
He threw him under the bus like he just lost the Democratic primary. He did.
All I can say is at least Bernie Sanders like didn't tell any of us to like fucking storm a building. You know, not storm, but like go to a building and occupy it. And then get like fucking arrested and thrown in jail and demonized. I mean, he just like took our money and, you know, promised shit. But you know, Trump, I think, did take it to another level because I think he blew dog whistles. You know, he didn't have anyone's back. He ran away like a little, you know, biatch. I mean, there's no other word to describe it. And that's what he's all about. I knew this. I mean, I litigated against the guy. I deposed him multiple times. We sued him for fraud. He's just an arrogant, little man who, and everyone knows that. And it's sad that people got hurt by listening to him until the bitter end. But I don't think those people are coming back. I think that really, that betrayal stings, and it stings forever. I mean, I'm in the, gab, the goo gab, so to speak, and I see all those angry Trump people who are no longer MAGA.
What are they? Where are they headed?
Yeah.
And can we rally them for some, like,
secession.
Huh?
Secession.
Oh, okay. That's cool, but
some of them will get sloughed off by other MAGA grifters who try to take Trump's place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of them are going to be like, you know what, this fucking, DC fucking hates us, and let's get into the Texas secession movement. I mean, or whatever. I mean, they're already those Texas has passed like laws of secession for like the past 20 years, and it's like 25% of the Texas legislature votes for secession. Okay, now I mean, this is before this. Okay, I mean, you think those people are not licking their chops? This is their moment. So they're gonna pass secession resolutions, and then when the rubber's gonna hit the road, because the federal government is gonna try to enforce some law in Texas that Texas doesn't want enforced, like give us all your guns, or take this vaccine and you can't ride an airplane. And I mean, there's going to be a standoff. That's where it's headed. Don't you think? Am I wrong?
I'm processing this in real time, but I can't. And Glory, you have too spoken to a number of Recall Gavin Newsom supporters, and I personally haven't talked to a single person involved in the Recall Newsom thing who isn't also a California secessionist.
And you guys have your own, like, secede from California, these like 4 counties, right? Or
there's a couple of different people who have put forth, like, there's a 2 Californias proposal, there's a 6 Californias proposal. They're both put out by like incredibly shady hedge fund guys. And one of but I mean, look, dude, it's I really haven't. Glory, have you talked to anyone in Recall Newsom that wasn't also like, and California needs to secede from the United States?
What? Actually, no. Most of the Recall Newsom organizers in LA that I've talked to have been like straight up small business owners and former Democrats. So like you get really interesting conversations with them from that perspective, and they're wonderful people, or at least the one that at least the ones that I've talked to, they're wonderful people. And with the Stop the Steal rallies and with January 6th, I feel like the Recall Newsom push has gotten a lot of welcome steam, really, because fuck Gavin McFuckass, and I think they're up to like 1.2 million petition signatures right now, and so that's like the latest count, and there's still more coming in.
Which is huge for California, because I mean, there's such a liberal stranglehold on, and I'm using the word liberal pretty fucking loosely here. Most of them are just right-wing psychopaths who need to run as a Democrat in order to get elected. But there's such a Democrat Party stranglehold on the state.
I used to live in LA. My brother lives in Bay Area. I mean, I would say this about, well, first of all, secession isn't just like secede from the Union. It's also like interstate secession. Don't forget Civil War. I mean, Virginia broke apart and it was never put back together again. Think about that. It's in our national DNA for pieces of the country to break off, and it's going to happen again. Whether or not it leads to, war is asymmetrical these days, so it's going to be kind of a funky civil war that's,
well, they don't even have to wage warfare that way, Jared. How do you secede and trade with your neighbors? What currency do you use? What are your values?
Why can't you envision like a Brexit-like situation where you have like a negotiated exit? Where we'll keep these trade relations, we'll have a joint security agreement, but Texas can follow its own constitution, and
well, what do they trade in? What's the dollar? Is it how do
that's part of the thing here.
Texas dollar does it take to make a US dollar?
Well, it's going to be interesting. It'll be like it'll be kind of like, Britain was never on the euro, but maybe Texas, maybe they can, in the first stage, agree to use the dollar, and it can be sort of a more of a symbolic. A lot of this is symbolic. It's how people feel about stuff. They want to feel like their voice is heard. They obviously know that DC doesn't give a fuck about them, so they're going to go back to Texas and all these other places, and they're going to be like, well, if they're not going to hear me there, like maybe they'll hear me at the State House in Austin, and they're going to go there. And unless the State House in Austin passes secession, they're going to be under a lot of pressure. And I'm telling you that they've already got the gears in motion. They've been passing those secession laws. Bringing them to the floor at least like every year since like 1985, and they usually get defeated with 30% of the vote or something. But there's going to be a lot more now, because there's a lot more of those constituents that got, know somebody that got shafted in DC. That's just the way I see it working. I don't see a lot of those people falling for another Trump. I think a lot of them are like, fool me once, type of people. Like you said,
I hope so, but let's look at the Bernie Sanders voters for that one. I think
a lot of Bernie Sanders voters broke off, though, because I don't think Bernie Sanders is nearly the popular figure that he was back in 2016. I don't think he could get the same kind of rallies, personally. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. He didn't on the Biden trail.
He phoned in his campaign in 2020.
Right.
And he still got a fuck ton of people out for
it. But did he get the same huge rallies? I don't know. I wasn't really following him. So
he did get a ton of large turnouts.
Here's what I do know, because in 2019 I had, or maybe it was 2018, but I had the guy who founded the Bernie or Bust organization.
Oh yeah, I know that guy
on the show. Victor
Tiffany is his name.
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah. He wrote a good book about that. Highly recommended.
He did.
Bernie or Bust.
And so I had him on the show, and I'm like, hey dude, let's talk numbers, like what, and he said that in 2016 88% of Sanders voters voted for Hillary Clinton. Out of the 12% that didn't, 6% voted Trump, and then the rest were either third party votes or didn't vote or whatever. But his point was that 88% stayed within the Democratic Party. Okay. I don't have yet numbers for how many Bernie voters voted for Biden, but I would guess, based just on what I saw on social media and shit like that, anywhere from 75 to like 82% of those Bernie Sanders voters voted for Biden.
The dynamics of the left translate to the dynamics of the right, though. I think we're talking about two different species.
That's fair.
I don't think we have the same. The right organizes itself according to like sort of this alpha male tribal identity, where there's like a strong man up top and everybody's like,
it tells you what you need to be afraid of.
Yeah. And that's why the Capitol thing actually went off in for a flash mob. I think it went off in a fairly tactical effective way until they got into the door. Of course, if Trump had been in the Senate with them, he could have like helped them with a platform if he was a true political figure, but he's not. He's just a shallow alpha male who ruled this, who's got like an unruly crowd of sheep there. But I don't think the left is organized according to that model. We're much more horizontal, I would say, if that makes any sense. We don't. We're not into like so much the alpha strongman as sort of like the sheepdog, the Bernie sheepdog who kind of like nips at us and kind of like moves us like from place to place. So I think the sheepdog, it's a little looser of a configuration.
It's still a personality, though, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah.
Yes, big time. I mean, the sheepdog has to have a lot of personality in order to do what he does and keep nipping at your heels. I mean, like Bernie Sanders, just the same damn thing over and over again, right? He's like a broken record. He's a sheepdog, yep, at your, and he kind of like works at the psychology of the left sheep, whereas the right sheep are like, they're kind of in an angry configuration and they're all looking up at like the alpha. So they're a much more like dangerous, and I don't mean to denigrate them, but I think they can be utilized in a much more destructive way. And everybody, they have this misconception on the right that the left is coextensive with Antifa. What they don't realize is that that's a lot of that is just instigated, street violence from on high. That's not like, we know what like the true left is. I mean, I know because I was in Philly in 2016. They're not out to hurt anyone. They're kind of gentle sheep that are like nipped along by the sheepdogs, but they're not out to like do damage.
That's fair. Or at least the part of the left that still believes that there's a political solution to this and a legislative solution to this. They
think too highly of their fellow human beings. They have too much respect for them.
Well, they also put a lot of stock in credentials.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of stock in credentials. They're very, very secular. The right has largely abandoned traditional religion, but still thinks in the dualist good evil framework, which is why they really like the alpha male, because they want to be protected by an alpha from the evil. But they work in a very dual, and that's why they fell for the Q psyop so easily, because it's all about the struggle.
Can we talk about that for a minute?
Oh yeah, we can talk about Q all day. That's my hobby on Gab is to fuck with the Q people, man. I mean, that's what more fun is that?
Oh my god!
The plan enough, Jared.
There was a story.
I'm still making my popcorn. I hear Trump's running the country from Mar-a-Lago now.
Is that the new line?
Well, no, actually, Biden's in on the scam, and so Biden is going to implement the storm now.
So Biden is part of the team now.
That's the Q shift. I mean, there's multiple Q shifts. I think they've gone off in all different directions, but the grifters are going down any path that seems like it might keep some people like donating to their Patreon.
Well, it's funny because you can see kind of the multiple facets of Q with the way they react to the Julian Assange case, because there's some people that are like, yeah, we got to get him extradited because he'll be safe there. It's all part of the plan. Right. And then there's the other facet that's like, yeah, Julian's a CIA psyop, fuck him. And it's like...
Yeah, they definitely scattered in a lot of different directions. I mean, some of them are still going, but I mean that particular psyop was designed for the right, by the CIA to pacify them, and they did like a brilliant job.
Oh my God, the exact people who would have been immediately activated and in the streets over any number of things that Trump did, like For example, having the Fed print 2/3 of all money ever printed in the span of like 25 months.
Right. I mean, Trump did the vaccine. Trump locked us down. I mean, they had to get those people on board. They wouldn't have been able. Hillary Clinton would have incited, like forget like the Capitol. If Hillary Clinton had been in office, she would have incited I mean, way worse than anything we've seen in those areas of the country. Because she's
happened with Hillary. Like, they wouldn't be taking that shit.
Right.
No, Ryan Christian, Last American Vagabond, shout out to him and his show. And I have had this conversation quite a few times, sometimes on camera, sometimes on the phone, but about the idea that Trump had to happen in order to, for this period of accelerationism that we've entered since 2016, right. that there would have been genuine, real resistance from not necessarily like just the right, but people in general, to lockdowns, to Operation Warp Speed, to all of this shit that just has fucking sucked up all the energy out of everyone, you know. And that in order to make it happen, they needed a strongman, fake populist, cult of personality type to begrudgingly sort of have to push back but go along with some of these things. Yeah. While the whole time they're just the largest upward transfers of wealth in recorded human history have taken place, not once, not twice, but 3 times under Donald Trump. And it's, I don't know, man. Does that like hold water with you?
Yes.
Yeah, you know.
Yes on all scores. And I mean, absolutely. I mean, he was used to implement an agenda to pacify certain elements that would be very unruly. The country is being looted by the oligarchs before our very eyes. There's nothing we can do about it. But at the same time, I think pacify is only part of the equation. I think agitate is the other side. And you can't pacify, do shit to people without agitating them. So I think there is a plan to agitate the country into a fragmentary state.
I mean they would try to get us to do a civil war for almost 5 years now.
At least. And they're gonna get us to the brink with the secession movements, I think, starting with Texas. And you know, all the other ones that are going to go on. I mean, cities are going to secede from states. I mean, just think about it. You know,
this is some like just black and white Hegelian dialectic shit.
Yeah,
here.
It's because we lost control. I mean, we're not at the controls. People who are at the controls do not care about fixing problems. They want to exacerbate problems, and they want the U.S. to fragment, like other countries have fragmented throughout history. It's the object of people who do not have your interests at heart. Unfortunately, I mean, the American people didn't protect themselves. What can I say? But you know, we can't beat ourselves up over that. I mean, this is my therapy, you know, part is that. You know, I always try to remind people, don't feel like you're somehow responsible or that you didn't, you know, this is a failing on your part individually, because this is where a lot of the stress comes from. It's like, oh my God, you know, it's so awful, you know, this, that, and the other thing. How do we do this? What's our practical solution? Well, there may not be a practical solution at this point, other than sort of, you know, jumping out of the way as pieces like fall off and just, you know, situating yourself well so that you can be of maximum use when it's safe to go out again. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I wouldn't get involved in politics right now. Are you? I mean, you couldn't pay me enough. I mean, it's why would you want to be in the fortified, you know, post-apocalyptic city of nightmares, like with crammed up next to Nancy Pelosi as like, you know, angry mobs are banging down your door. I mean,
yeah,
what kind of job is that?
Crammed up with Nancy Pelosi, because then we could get like, you know, a Glory v. Nancy cage fight, and I'd like to participate in that.
I've said for a while now that the only conceivable reason I would ever run for office is because there's a possibility that my opponent's opposition research team would be able to help me piece together part of my 20s. Okay. But like outside of that, there's just no real reason whatsoever that I would consider running for office. Although I've been asked to like puppet master a couple elections before, or a couple of candidates before, and that's just weird, man. Like that's a really weird concept to me. But like flat out, I've had people approach me and be like, hey, would you like to help us take over a local city council, and can you, like, you know, mold a couple candidates for us and
write talking you to points. Be the man behind the man.
Yeah, and I'm like, you don't want me to do this, I promise. You know, I guarantee you do not want me to do this, because I'm gonna get some poor fool shot. You know,
well, I mean, you get involved in politics. I don't care. I mean, probably more likely at the local level, you're going to get into the crossfire of something really ugly. I mean, that's where like the people actually bring the firearms to the meetings and unload, not the Capitol. I mean, it's like the local.
Well, it's a board of supervisors.
Those places are even worse. You know, there's no security. You know, but you know, I mean, and that's where a lot of the action's going to be. I mean, is the locality. People aren't going to like get on a plane and go to DC again and again, but what they are going to do is they're going to show up at their state capitals. They're going to, I mean, in Palm Beach County, we had some really antagonistic meetings over the face mask ordinances, where people showed up and really lit into the county commissioners trying to, and it's going to be issues like that, vaccines, face masks, things that are actually impeding people from making a living because they're like shutting down their businesses. And they'll probably loosen it up a little under Biden. But once you get in the habit of closing down the entire country, it's sort of like a monkey with the cocaine. You're just going to do it again and again and again and again. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like this. Once you go down that route, you don't soften it. You know, you might use up a little
that's what
bit.
We told people from the beginning of this shit. We were like, look, whatever you think about coronavirus, whatever you think it is or isn't, when emergency powers are granted, they're never taken away. Right. Ever. You only add on top of that.
Correct.
And it drives me fucking nuts. Because I like, one of my favorite things to do now, whenever somebody brings up or is like, hey, you know, could you put a mask on or something like that, you know, and I'm like, why are you willing to help reorganize society over a virus that kills 0.4 to 0.6% of the people that get it, but you're not ready to reorganize society because it's being run by sociopathic pedophiles?
Well, I think the society's already been reorganized. I mean, they're taking their direction from media celebrities, or, you know, they're not taking their direction from their pastor or the wise person in their family, or you know, the tribal elders or the city council. I mean, all these, you know, or the mayor. I mean, all those traditional positions of responsibility and authority, moral beacons, they've all been destroyed. And it all goes back to the Beatles. Okay, it all
well
goes
done, Jared.
Yeah.
Well
Segue.
But it does. It does. That was part of Tavistock. They wanted to remake, just as you said. Why are you willing to reorganize society? Well, Tavistock actually did reorganize society. They saw the traditional religions as propagating moral systems that were outdated and, you know, did more harm than good. and they were motivated by this utopian vision of getting people to relate to each other on this universal human level. And they propagated it through music, and they propagated it through various experimental drugs, and they propagated it through messaging. I mean, the Woodstock, you know what Woodstock's real name was? Yeah.
Please share.
No, it was called the Aquarian Exposition. Why was it called the Aquarian Exposition? Well, because it was this idea of an age of Aquarius that was being ushered in, and we often associate that with like kind of new agey, like okay, age of Aquarius, healing crystals, but that's just one element that sprouted out of this general idea that we were entering a new age, and we were going to be able to shape our destiny in ways that were radically different from the age of Pisces or whatever came before. And another interesting thing, the concept of the Rolling Stone. Okay, you know the concept of the Rolling Stone. It's actually, it goes back to a very old proverb. Comes, I think, from Roman times, and I don't know the original Latin, but it basically is like, what, the Rolling Stone gathers no moss, right? Yep. Well, isn't it interesting that in the 60s, within like a couple years, there are actually 3 separate and I would say unrelated, but extremely intricate related at the same time, instances of Rolling Stone being foisted on the population. Okay, you have Rolling Stone magazine, you have the band The Rolling Stones, and you have Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone, maybe his most famous song. What is this, the incantation of this ancient proverb meant to be? Why was Tavistock propagating this? Well, think about it. What does a Rolling Stone, the concept of a Rolling Stone really mean? It's the concept of eternally changing. Eternally changing, never settling down, never settling into a single identity, right? An eternally fixed, unfixed consciousness. That's what if I had to boil down the Aquarian project to an essence, that's what it was. You can see this in a lot of the Beatles music. I really suggest people check out the Sage of Quay, or Sage of Quay. He's got a great documentary just going through the Beatles. There's also a great book by a guy named Nicholas Collerstrom on specifically on Paul McCartney that goes into great depth about what, I mean, it's like a mystery. It's a great mystery story, and just for that fact alone, people should read it. There's also the autobiography of Billy Shears, which is actually a book that was written by the guy who became Paul McCartney, basically confessing to everything. Published in 2016. So he wants people to know, and that's the interesting thing about this, is that these secret knowledge is being, formerly secret knowledge is being exposed to us at this extreme rate. So while at the same time we're being locked in our houses and we're being made to be afraid of each other, we have access to incredible stores of information that are just, if you access it and you think about it critically, you can actually deprogram yourself. So this is a great opportunity, I would say, if you're feeling kind of shut in and maybe antsy, take the time to deprogram yourself, and you know, enjoy the fruits of deprogramming. I mean, it's you know, it's kind of an interesting process, and I think it's something that's going to have to be done on a massive scale at some point to recover from what's coming.
I agree with that. I want to we titled this episode "Everything You Love Is a Psyop." Okay, I don't know if we told you that or not. But right before this, I was listening to John Prine, who more or less owed his career to Bob Dylan.
Okay.
Right. And so I was thinking about like kind of the massive differences between the music of John Prine and the music of Bob Dylan. Whereas like Dylan is famous for these protest songs, right? John Prine necessarily isn't, but if you want to, I don't know if you're familiar with the tune or not. It's called Sam Stone.
No, I don't know that one.
It's an anti-Vietnam War song.
Okay.
About a soldier who returned from the war. And the refrain is, "There's a hole in Daddy's arm. That's where the money goes."
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
It's
kind
a
of
heavy song. Huh?
It's kind of a dark song, or
Heavy. Yeah.
kind of like Waltzing Matilda. You ever heard?
A little bit, man. A little bit.
Because that's a song about a soldier returning from Gallipoli, and just totally abandoned by society, and watching the parade go by, and very heavy stuff. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
Oh, no. It's just, it's so far and away removed from, what, like, the surface scratching of most of Dylan's music.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've read stuff on Dylan, and I don't know how credible this is, but there's a line of historical research that I've read that says that the people that were in the folk scene, like the true folk scene, when Dylan came along, they knew what was going on, because these guys were very familiar with the concept of infiltration. A lot of them had union backgrounds. I mean, there was a tight connection between the folk movement and the union movement.
Mm-hmm.
And when they saw Dylan show up, they're like, "Oh, here comes the infiltrators." This guy, has been destined to sort of co-opt the I guess the kingship of the folk movement, and to speak for all of us, and be sort of the media spokesperson for all of us. And there was a lot of resentment. I mean, he was booed off the stage in what was it, the Newport Jazz?
It was at Newport because he showed up with a 6-pack of black dudes with electric instruments.
That's what the story says,
right?
But
right.
Would he? I mean, that's what the narrative explains it that way. But
Mm-hmm.
At least there's the fact that he was booed suggests that there was some anti-Dylan sentiment out there at that time, and I think it personally, I think it came. These people were not dummies. Okay, they knew what was going on. I mean, Dylan. Dylan was. There's a weird story in his past. The day the music died, when the plane went down with the 3 stars, and
Big Bopper, Buddy
Holly, and Richie Valens.
Richie Valens, that's right.
So my understanding is that one of those 3, maybe it was a Big Bopper, maybe it was either the Big Bopper or Buddy Holly, was scheduled to play in Minnesota. And of course, after the plane went down, they had to find a replacement. So they found a guy who became, I think, Bobby B. And guess who played piano for Bobby B? Dylan. Okay. So they pulled him. They had already identified and pulled him in. And Bobby B was like a no talent, but very connected person, as was Dylan, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. He was actually. His background looks nothing like a guy who would grow up to be a folk singer. He pledged a fraternity. He was more of if you read accounts of him, he was, his family was very wealthy. They owned furniture stores or something all over Minnesota. He was
Zimmerman Furniture.
Yeah.
I'm pretty, at least 20 years ago when I was hanging out in Minnesota, there were still Zimmerman Furniture
Still
Store.
Zimmerman Furniture. So this guy, he was born into a connected family, and at a very early age, the music industry in Minnesota identified as somebody they wanted to push for whatever reason. They hooked him up with Bobby V, and you know that particular line didn't work, so they remade him as a folk singer, and there's going to be questions of authorship of those works. I mean, did he write everything? I haven't looked into it, Dylan, in as much detail as the Beatles, but I will say this. I mean, there was an interview not too long ago where he said straight up, I think it was on 60 Minutes, I made a deal with the master commander. Okay, that's what he said. I mean, I think a lot of these people, they confess at some point, especially the artists.
Kanye West did.
Yeah.
Like, right out in front of everyone. I sacrificed my mom to be here tonight.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
Straight up.
Yeah.
This guy, yeah.
Straight up.
And
that was right before the cheese slid
all
all the way off the cracker with that dude too.
I'm not familiar with his mom. What happened with his mom?
I don't. Dude, I'm really bad at relaying this part of the story. I really because the bulk of my knowledge about all of this comes from my friend Sam at his show Tinfoil Hat, where they had a bunch of people on to talk about like well, what is it? It's the Hip Hop and the Devil episode, which is a fucking great episode. But yeah, I would go check it out. I can't remember exactly what happened to his mom. Somebody in the chat's probably gonna scream at me. Hopefully, I don't know, do that. But like, there was a show where Kanye like straight up said like I sacrificed my mother for this fame and shit like that. Yeah. But there have been a handful of other incidents like that throughout music where they do come out and say it.
Yeah.
You know, Hank Williams III.
Okay.
So talent skips a generation. Hank Sr.
Yeah.
You know, dead. Yeah. And OD'd on alcohol and pills.
Yeah.
You know, young. And Hank Jr. and then was Randall Hank Williams. And then this is Shelton Hank Williams, the third. His first album, like he flat out says, the only reason I'm doing any music is because of a paternity suit.
Okay.
Like
inspiring.
Huh?
Inspiring.
This is a dude who never wanted to be a Hank Williams. Never wanted that, like, you know, never wanted, and he got a fucking, he got a paternity suit, and then Curb Records came calling, and Curb Records is like Nashville's fucking mafia.
Right.
And
yeah, it was probably a honeypot.
I learned well, so check it out, man. Hank III was the bass player in one of Phil Anselmo from Pantera's bands.
Okay.
And he was playing like under an assumed name, and he just, you know, fucking wanted to hang out in Texas and fucking not be, he was raising coonhounds and shit like that, you know, like just fucking, and yeah, he knocked somebody up and said, there's a line about doing 18 years for a one-night stand. And
well, speaking of paternity suits, just to get back to the Paul McCartney thing.
Oh, okay.
I know that's the running theme, and you know, I'm sort of on alert for ways of weaving that in here. So the evidence in Paul McCartney died in or disappeared or something in 1966 and then was replaced. I mean, it's incredible evidence. You know, you really can only go through it yourself to be convinced. That's how I would put it. You have to do you have to be guided by like somebody like a Mike Williams or this book by Nick Colstrom and just go through evidence. But one of the pieces of evidence that, you know, as a lawyer that I really like to, and this is the kind of evidence that really persuades me, is that so Paul McCartney was sued in a paternity suit, okay, by one of the original girlfriends of the original Paul McCartney while they were in Hamburg. And she was like a German woman, and she had a daughter. And she ended up suing Paul McCartney, but she sued him in the 70s or late 70s or early 80s. By that time, Paul McCartney was dead and had been replaced. So the guy comes forward. He says, sure, I'll give my DNA. I didn't father this child. And it turns out that it was true, even though this was Paul McCartney's girlfriend, and this is the original Paul McCartney's daughter. And you know, the second Paul McCartney confesses to all this in the memoirs of Billy Shears. But you know, that's extraordinary evidence right there. The other evidence that's extraordinary is that in early 1980s, Paul McCartney was doing a tour of Japan with Wings. Okay, and so he shows up at the Tokyo airport, flies in with a whole bunch of marijuana in his suitcase. Okay, because he's Paul McCartney. He doesn't give a fuck that the Japanese don't want you bringing in marijuana into the country in 1982.
Harsh about that too.
Yeah, really harsh. So they search his bag and they find like a whole duffel bag full of weed, and they're like, you know, we're gonna have to arrest you for this. Well, it turns out that, you know, and they ask him for identification and they take his fingerprints and all that. Well, it turns out that they've got fingerprints for Paul McCartney on file through Interpol from when Paul McCartney was in Germany in the 1960s, you know, running loose, you know, with the Beatles. The problem is that the fingerprints don't match because it's not the same guy. So they're like, who the fuck are you? You know, this is the Japanese. They're like, who the hell are you? You're claiming to be, you're not Paul McCartney, you're some imposter. So the British Secret Service had to get involved while Paul languished in jail for like a couple of weeks. And they're like, you know, basically they had to go head to head with the Japanese government and be like, you know, you're going to have to let that guy go. You know, and I don't know what exactly they disclosed to Japan, but, you know, they solved it for him. But I mean, this is the kind of evidence that cannot be ignored. I mean, this is the type of forensic evidence that makes this not just like some loony college conspiracy theory that was brushed off so easily in the late 60s, but something that people really need to take seriously now, because I'm telling you, you know, some people may think it's kind of silly. Some people may not care because they don't like the Beatles, but the ramifications of this stuff are huge. And the psychological ramifications, I mean, we can't even, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't speak to the ramifications, but it seems to me that they're going to be enormous. I want to kind of like, it's already out. It's already out. That's the thing. The information's already out. Paul McCartney has confessed. He's written a whole damn book on it. It's called The Memoirs of Billy Shears. It's a very interesting read, but it's not accepted. It's not even remotely acknowledged by anyone in the society except like a few cranks, whatever we're called.
So just so we're clear, the idea is that Paul McCartney is replaced by Billy Shears. Correct. And this introduces the new era of the Beatles, which then begins the moral and social decay of the West.
Yeah, I think it's part of this sort of, you know, there's this theme of dualism that runs throughout, but it's sort of like switching, you know, and again, to bring in the concept of the Rolling Stone, change, the concept of a flexible identity. One day you can be like the Beatles singing like "Hold My Hand," and the next minute, you know, subconsciously, you know that Paul McCartney is dead because you've absorbed all this the secret or the hidden messaging, although your conscious won't acknowledge that. But what your conscious does acknowledge is there's a radical change in the music style. So the first album that comes out with Billy Shears at the helm of the band as Paul McCartney is called Sgt. Pepper's. And there's actually a song on that album. Well, the song is, what's it called? What would you do if I, Ringo sings it.
Oh, with a little help from my friends.
Yeah, a little help from my friends. There you go.
Yeah.
Ringo sings that. But before Ringo starts singing, they introduce Billy Shears. Okay, the point of that album is to introduce Billy Shears to the public. Billy Shears is Paul McCartney. Ringo Starr in that song is playing Billy Shears because, and that's, I think, how the song is best interpreted, is that he's going to get by with a little help from his friends, even if he sings a little out of tune, because, it's not the same Paul McCartney. It's a new guy, But the belief is that Billy Shears was working behind the scenes with the Beatles, maybe even from the beginning or from the early days. He was a familiar character, and in fact, before the belief is that he had a number of characters throughout his career, including another British popular singer called Viv Stanshall, who had his own band. If you take a picture of Viv Stanshall and you put it next to a picture of Paul McCartney, they actually look remarkably similar. I mean, there's actually no doubt. I mean, there are side-by-side comparisons that are incredible. So he was kind of a guy that had like this changeable identity. He was able to move from character to character. He played with Denny Laine, who he later formed Wings with, but Denny Laine in a band called Denny Laine and the Diplomats, as a character named Phil Ackrell, before he became Paul McCartney. And there's some suggestion that he's the illegitimate son of Aleister Crowley, which sounds extraordinary, but it could be true. He might even be related to Barbara Bush.
I was just gonna say.
Which is all, I mean,
go there.
Right, but then these people are related to each other. I mean, when you look at their lineages, just like you were saying with Hank Williams Jr., or Hank Williams III, right? Lineage is a big deal for the way these people think, because lineage, if you know someone's lineage, you also you're able to control them easier. I mean, look what they were able to do with Hank Williams III. They made him, make an album against his will.
4.
It's remarkable.
4 albums.
4 albums.
Yeah.
I mean,
like straight up. And the reason I was actually working back towards Tavistock with all of that, and it's why I brought up Curb Records and the sort of like stranglehold that these songwriting factories have on pop country.
Yeah.
And to his credit, Hank III spent every album shitting on pop country and the Nashville establishment and what they are and what they do and how they fucking work. And taken as like an anthology, and just based solely on, if you read the lyrics like you would a book, what Hank III does is really let you know just how much of a fucking manufactured psychological operation pop country is.
Yeah.
And when you look at
pop anything really.
Well, I mean, but look at what pop country sells you, and it's this idea of a Rockwellian America that never fucking existed, where every soldier is a hero and every fucking fish is catchable, and
Right.
like there's always cold beer in the pickup truck, and as long as you buy that pickup truck and you buy this beer and you put it in this brand cooler and
Right.
you have this fishing rod, you'll be able to achieve all of these goals.
Right. Right. And it's so far from its roots, which was like poor people's music,
Well, and that's the other thing about
family. You know,
that's the other thing about the Hank Williams family is that they were like the anti-establishment.
Oh yeah.
And all of them paid a significant price for it.
Oh yeah, they were hard scrabble people. All the pioneers of country. I mean, they were, and a lot of them were, you know, they were singing religious songs. I mean, it was very much about religion. It really wasn't that much of a. I mean, gospel and country were like the same thing, you know. I'm talking back to that. This is the roots. I mean, it's totally. I think you can look at any genre of music and that's become popularized, as Glory says, and you're going to see a similar commodification to the point of actually destroying the genre and making it pretty much sound. I mean, don't they like mumble rap in country now? I mean,
for sure.
I thought I saw an example of that. Like it's like mumble rap country. So everything.
There's been like country rap for a decade now or more, and it's just garbage.
Right, but now it's even like the mumble rap, right? Like the most, you know, like well, don't they call it mumble rap? I don't know. I mean, but everything sounds. I mean, it's every, you know, music that all sounds the same. I mean, that never appealed to me. I mean, that's why I don't really, you know, try to pick music based on marketing. You know, I mean, it's because it all sounds the same at some level. It's the same beats. It's the same. You know, the same modified voices with the auto tune, and it's
my god,
you know, that same, you know, breakbeat in the background. It's sad. It's sad. It pollutes the airwaves. Thankfully, we can shut it off if we don't like it, and sit in quarantine in our homes and not have to hear anything except, you know, the chickens. As I told you before the show, you know, I'm a man who was made for quarantine. I mean, it doesn't bother me because I don't really go out anyway. So, you know, I mean, it's all, you know, the psychological stresses are all about your perspective, you know.
That's fair. Well, hell, man, we've been going for 2 hours.
Hey, it's been fun, man. I've enjoyed this conversation tremendously with you guys. I appreciate the work you do. You know, I don't really go on shows anymore.
Let's do the moon one.
Doesn't like me. The left doesn't like me. You know, I'm
neither.
I'm a horrible conspiracy theorist, and you know, just an alt-right, alt-left, communist, Nazi, you know, CIA asset.
Here.
They called my bot like a CIA asset the other day.
I know you're. Oh, and
like,
shout out
telling them that
bot.
The bot was just telling them that Trump wasn't going to be inaugurated. And they're like, you horrible, you know. It's like, I mean, this is my concern. You know, we're seeing this kind of messaging coming. You know, it's not stability. It's not, you know. There's a lot of people are going off into all different realities. Some of their own making, some of other people's makings, and it makes for fragmentation. That's why I see fragmentation in the future, more and more of it.
I mean, yeah, the only prediction that I continue to make is that it's only going to become more absurd. And I feel like every time I've made that, I've been correct. But it's funny that you're both an alt-right and alt-left conspiracist.
Right.
Because oh god, it's been almost 2 years now, but Tim Pool called me like the sum total of the conspiratorial left, and I feel like that should be my bio on Twitter. But
the sum total. I mean, you know, these conspiracies. I mean, they travel back on themselves. I mean, eventually, one day, sometime in the future, what people will see was going on is not that there were conspiracy theorists, but there were people trying to decode reality and against an incredibly entrenched belief system. And these labels really won't have any meaning except as artifacts of a bygone era. But until then, we have to press on, I guess.
Fair enough. Jerry Beck, thank you so much for hanging out today. It's been wonderful.
Let's do the moon one. Let's do the moon one next.
Yeah, let's do the moon next.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. We'll set that up here soonish.
Okay.
Yeah, fuck yeah. And somebody in the chat was like, can't we just do a show about like, a music appreciation show?
Sure. I'm down for that.
I might do some of that. I want to remind everybody.
Well,
not without getting massive copyright.
Oh, okay. That's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, any excuse to yank a channel that YouTube is going at. And like really honestly, I can give a fuck about YouTube, but I don't want to piss off like Rockfin or D Live or the other places that stream on. Because we kind of got to do it somewhere.
Isn't it fucking crazy how music suddenly became free? I mean, we talk about crazy things happening, like coronavirus is pretty fucking nuts. I mean, fucking whatever you want. I mean, but that was a pretty cartoonish event. But see, it kind of redounded to our benefit, so it didn't like bother us as much, right? You could suddenly access any song in the world for free. I mean, that was in the old days. Music was really fucking expensive.
It's true, and then look at the backlash from that, and it wasn't just the RIAA going ape shit. It was like SOPA and PIPA. And
they sued a lot. They sued people into bankruptcy to make an example.
Oh, dude, the RIAA is back at it again lately too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, they're pulling another round of that.
Law school. Yeah, I was in law school when the RIAA started its crusade against the Napster. Napster was
suing 13-year-olds and shit.
Yeah, no, I had a law professor who actually defended one of them, but he actually did such a fucking horrible job that like he made the guy could have settled for like $5,000. Instead, he took it like all the way to the bitter end, and he ended up getting like a $600,000 judgment against him, and had his entire financial life ruined as a grad student, all because he like accepted the free legal advice of a law professor. Never do that, by the way. Law professors do not know how to practice law as a general rule. They make a situation worse. It's just the old adage: if it's free, there's a reason. Just a little legal advice to close things out.
Right. The those that can do and those that can't teach.
That's another one.
One of those.
But see, medical school professors actually are practitioners. They actually practice medicine for the most part, so they actually know what they're doing. But law school, totally not the case. Very few actually practice law in a functional way. So.
It's hard to explain the theory of cutting open another human being and removing organs. Like you kind of have to have that hands-on experience. Really.
I agree, and I think the same thing should hold true for law school. In that you shouldn't have like people like talking like garbled theoretical nonsense and saying that's how you teach law, which is how we do it in this country. We don't actually make people experience the practice of law until they're already qualified as lawyers, and that's why one of the reasons the lawyer class in this country is in bad shape.
Yeah,
many other. I could do a show on that. I could go on, but
most of my friends who are lawyers have told me that like with enough basic rote memory and stimulants, anybody can become a lawyer.
Yeah, you definitely don't need 3 years of additional school at like $60,000 a pop to learn what they teach you. You can I think you can teach yourself with some pointed online instruction everything you need to know. And yeah, I think the law school industry may be out the window anyway as the economy continues to get shut down and grind to a halt and whatnot.
I mean, shit, dude. I was just over at some friend's house the other night, both of whom work for the University of California system. And they were talking about how there are plans to reopen the UC system for the spring semester, and as California goes, or at least the UC system goes, the rest of the state does, and then to a degree the rest of the country. But it's the state's single largest employer. Yeah. You know, like so much of our economy is riding on this industry of academia.
But I mean, you know, what's going to happen is academia is, I mean, it's headed to like a full online thing. I mean, that's where we're going. I think they're remaking educational institutions probably worldwide to be
and they're letting Eric Schmidt do it.
Right.
Yeah, right. And like this weird online but in person but not in person hybrid.
Right. But they're going to eventually really minimize the in-person stuff because it's so expensive to keep up the facilities and you know, everything that goes into a university. And as you said, they typically are the largest employers in any given city. And it's just really sad to imagine all those people going to get canned who work in the dining halls and the dorm services and the administration. And I mean, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of people across the country. They're just going to lose their jobs with no contingency plan, and they're just going to print off these occasional stimulus checks, which are going to be our UBI, and throw them at people as if it's supposed to solve the problem. And you know, the problem is you keep printing money like that, and you lower the value of the dollar through massive inflation. And yeah, we're going to end up in that situation where there's not enough jobs and people are getting measly handouts from the government to like buy food. So that's where we're headed. It makes me sick. I mean, it's no way to run a society, but like I said, what can we do but like identify the pieces that are falling off and avoid them and make sure the people we care about are avoiding them, and then, you know, regroup when it's safe to go out there again.
Grow food, buy bullets.
Yeah.
that should really be like, I don't know, man. Maybe my epitaph. I we'll see. Jared, you have yourself a fantastic day. We'll have you back on real soon. I do. I thoroughly enjoy these. Glory, what you got?
I can't think of anything right now.
Nothing quippy. That's so unlike you.
Yeah, right, Glory?
Everyone could just marvel at Fidel Castro and Diego Maradona.
Yes.
Okay,
but seriously though, this was an awesome episode, and I always love it when Jared comes on because yeah.
Well, thank you. I love being here. It's great talking to you guys, and everybody, you know, stay safe and, you know, keep the chin up.
Hell yeah. We'll be back at do you want to do this at 3 or 4? Y'all, Glory, Josh,
whatever. Your call.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll go ahead and do this at 3.
Couldn't wait. After the live stream ended, you wanted to have a production.
No, because I got to tell everybody when we're going to be on next, because it's part of, you know, the closeout thing. So we'll be back at 3 p.m.
We do it live, Salty. We do it live,
6
Salty.
p.m. East Coast time for our Sunday afternoon Rockfin exclusive. Go ahead and make your free Rockfin account if you haven't already. It's where we're going to be when YouTube decides to yank the channel because we decided to have too many accurate conversations.
Okay, wait, hold up. I have an outro actually, because I need to correct some clear falsehoods in the chat. Fourth round of the FA Cup took place this morning, and Manchester United beat Liverpool. Just saying, you know who comes out on top in the rivalry? First in the Premier League right now, and we just come out on top. So, Red Sea Socialist, fuck off. You know,
Nothing easier in the football world than being a Manchester United fan.
So Manchester beat Liverpool.
Arsenal tries to fight relegation, Red Sea. I know it must be hard to be an Arsenal fan in these times, but you know, Man United, we're getting our dues now. So
good. So we ended off on a good note, because Liverpool being the home of the Beatles, I think that ties things up very, very nicely. Well done.
Yes.
Make sure that you're hanging out next week. Vanessa Beeley is going to be on. She's going tomorrow to interview the most recent survivors of Israeli air attacks in northern Syria. And there's, oh my God, Syria's been bracing for the Biden administration. Vanessa's got a couple of good articles out on the wallwillfall.com that highlight this. This is continuity of government at its ugliest. And she's going to I don't know, probably make us all feel like we need to travel to Syria. Fucking but yeah, it's disgusting. And while in the meantime, go look up Desert Crescent Energy. I think that's it. That's the company that is helping steal Syrian oil through the U.S. military. I want to make sure I get the name right, though. Where'd that go? Hit. That's Bill Gates getting hit in the face with a pie. That's definitely not what I was looking at. Delta Crescent Energy. Delta Crescent Energy, established under the Trump administration to steal oil from Syria with the help of Kurdish separatists. So yeah, never a dull fucking moment, right? Make sure that you're here for that. Make sure that you're hanging out here in a few hours. Big thanks again to Jared, to my co-host Glory Jones, Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos, everybody in the chat. Fucking love you guys. We'll see you soon. Good luck to us all.
All right, take it easy.